This video is brought to you by dankritual.com. If you use the promo code DREW10 at checkout, you can get 10% off of your order of the tan or green 2-player cloth playmats. Get your playmat today. My promo code DREW10 also gives you 10% off of a pink or blue yokai deck box to keep your deck safe. So go ahead and grab one of those while you're getting your playmats too. What is up, everybody? I just wanted to do a little message before this starts. This is a really important announcement, so make sure you listen up because this is definitely something you're going to want to hear. So, Dank Ritual has been kind enough to allow me to host a contest to give away a playmat. So, it's going to be one of the Covenant playmats that you guys just saw in the promo in the very beginning of the video. And if you leave a comment down below, your name will be automatically entered and you'll get the opportunity to possibly win one of the Covenant playmats, the one that I use. It'll be directly shipped to you by Dank Ritual, which is also really cool. They'll just send it to you, you know, and I'll get everybody's information for that. But all you have to do is comment down below. Tell me what you love about my channel and tell me the things that you look forward to seeing. So if you leave a comment down below with all that, you're going to be automatically entered. So that's really cool. So go ahead and, you know, enter for the chance to win a free playmat. Well, I mean, it's free. Why wouldn't you try, right? All right, let's hop right into the video. What is up, everybody? It is Drew Travel, the Burning Abyss, here with another video. And before I had uploaded my Burning Abyss deck profile, I'd uploaded a Salamangreat deck profile. And this list might be slightly different. I'd honestly have to go back and watch the video to see what I've changed. But I'm going to do some test hands with this because a lot of people like seeing me do test hands with decks that I show off on the channel. So I figure if I can show a test hand video off with each deck that I do a profile on, that people may enjoy that. So we're going to go ahead and just mix this up. It's already mixed up as it is. I've been doing test hands with it all day. But yeah, we'll go ahead and shuffle this up a bit and do a few hands just to, you know, give everyone the gist as to what the deck does and what I would do in certain scenarios. So grabbing 5 cards here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can see that we've got a decent hand because we have a lot of access to different things here. So this is good going first or second. We have hand traps, we have engine cards, we have counters to hand traps. So yeah, this is actually really solid. So let's assume that we go first. We can go ahead and do the circle, and we'll go ahead and grab our copy of Gazelle. Now in this instance, it's kind of tough because it's like, okay, I have to kind of normal summon the Gazelle, which isn't always ideal, but you have other cards to really get your engine going. So you normal the Gazelle, and you can either choose to do Foul as Chainlink 2 for the dump, or you can just do the dump, and if they try and ash it, you could always just hit the called by on it. So let's assume that we just do this as the Chainlink 1. And in this scenario, we have 2 options, and I think both of them are, you know, justifiable, but you could send Falco or you could send Jaguar. In this scenario, I'm going to send the Jaguar. Now, you do have the other option to send something like Spinny, and you could always special the Spinny and make Mirage Stalio and go into the Jaguar, but we don't need to do that. That puts a lot into grave. Technically, it does work, but then you're locked into fires, and if we want to do anything that's non-fire related, it just hurts. So we can now link our Gazelle for our Baylinks. We can do Baylinks Chainlink 1 and Foul Chainlink 2. So this hits the board, and then we get to search for a Sanctuary. There we go. Now, there are obviously 15 different lines that you can go to with a lot of these hands. I'm going to try and explain different things, just like I did in the Burning Abyss video, as to how you can dump stuff and change what you're dumping. So we can now activate the Sanctuary, and then we'll put that over there. And then we would probably reincarnate the Baylinks into another Balinx. And then we could shuffle this Balinx into the deck to summon our Jack Jaguar. The other option that we have is that we wouldn't reincarnate. We would just use the Fowl and the original Balinx to make a Sunlight Wolf. And then we'd reincarnate the Sunlight Wolf to grab Circle. And then when we shuffle back, the Jaguar would allow us to add the Gazelle back to hand. So there's about 15 lines I can, like, there's so many lines you can go through just where I am right now. It depends completely on your matchup. So if you want to play around like Sword Soul or Despia, which are two of the best decks, this is one of your best routes to go. You can then overlay for your copy of Baguska, and that pretty much just is going to shut out the Sword Soul and Despia matchup, because all their stuff is going to go to defense and they're not going to have anything to do. And you have these cards to also interact with your opponent, which is really good. So they're probably not going to even be able to get over your Balinx. If they're playing something like Sword Soul, they might be able to make a Monk and swing into this and kill it. But even if they like link off of Vishuda, you can just crow the Vishuda and then they won't be able to use the effect. And then if they happen to have a way to send another one, you still have the Called By to banish another one. So that's really sweet. And then you have the Imperm on top of it. Like this just kind of like slows down all the decks that you don't want to deal with. So like that's a really positive thing. Like I said, there were a bunch of other lines I could have gone into there. I could have gotten the Gazelle back to hand and the Circle back to hand. I could have done the Mirage Stalio play by sending the Spinny, and then that would have summoned everything out, which also would have pretty much gotten you here for the most part, because you would still get the Jack Jaguar to go off. So it's somewhat similar, but let's go ahead and shuffle this up. That was just a quick little example. Obviously we'll see a lot of other variants throughout this. I'm going to try and do 4 to 5 test hands, because I think that's more than enough to kind of get the point across as to what we're trying to accomplish here. So we'll mix this up a little bit. So when I record these videos, the camera that I use, I zoom out a little bit, and like it's an option. If you have an iPhone, you know, because I just filmed my iPhone, I just hit the 0.5 times zoom, so it zooms out to like half scope. So when I shuffle the cards, it looks like my hands are a lot closer to the camera than they actually are. And sometimes I think I'm gonna hit the camera, but I never do. But we got 5 more cards here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this is pretty crazy for a lot of reasons. One of the big things is the ability to search and draw with this deck. So if your opponent is playing something like Droll, or you suspect they're playing Droll, you can circle during draw phase and they're not going to be able to Droll you. So let's say we circle during draw phase and we search for Gazelle, because Gazelle is going to be the optimal line here. It's somewhere right there. Perfect. Boom. I'm actually not going to shuffle because we're going back in. So Circle goes to grave. Now we can sign up mining, discard a Spinny, and we're going to search for Buffalo. So this is why it's, you know, so at this point, it's like, okay, if they go ahead and they Droll you now after the mining, it's like, all right, so I don't normal summon the Buffalo. You would instead summon the other Spinny. But if they don't Droll you, then you're really off to the races, because you're normal your Buffalo and you're going to link it. And you're going to get your Balinx. The only downside is that you're not going to be able to chain block the Buffalo because you already have the Sanctuary in hand, which is perfectly fine. Doesn't make a difference. We're just doing test hands to assume that we can just pop off completely. So the Buffalo triggers to discard the other Spinny, and we get to draw 2 cards. We draw a copy of Jaguar and Foxy. On the resolution, we can then trigger Gazelle. So this will hit the board. And then the effect of Gazelle to dump will trigger. And in this scenario, it's probably best to send Roar. Roar is going to be really good here. Now from this point, we're going to special the Spinny out with its effect. We're going to overlay and make Stalio. We can then use Stalio to detach the Gazelle. And even though we have a Foxy in hand, we are going to summon Foxy. The reason being is that it just gets us our Jaguar engrave. So now we have our Foxy on board, because we could have just summoned Jaguar, but now we're going to have extra bodies, which is really important. So we link these off, and we're going to make a Sunlight Wolf. And the cool part is now, which I was mentioning before, the Foxy is going to be able to do crazy stuff to help us extend. That's why we're going to activate our Sanctuary, and we'll use the effect of Foxy Engrave, discarding our Jaguar. And when it hits the zone that Sunlight Wolf points to, we can add a fire monster back, which is going to be our Gazelle. So Gazelle now comes to hand. From here, we have a bunch of different lines that we can run through, a bunch of different options that we have. So in this scenario, you have to consider a lot of things. You have to consider, okay, I don't have a lot of hand traps. I need to do a bunch of stuff to go ahead and line my plays up to be able to get into some hand traps and some interruptions, which we do have our Roar Engrave, which will end up coming back in a short moment. But we have to just look at the board and say, okay, what can I do that seems optimal, that would help the functionality out of what I'm doing and where I'm going with this play. So looking at our extra deck, we have a Lingeribo, we have a Splash Mage, which the effect won't even go off because we've used Stalio. We have 2 transcodes, which also won't go off because we've used Mirage Stalio. So what we can do is we can go ahead and link some stuff off to clear some space. Now this Stalio should have been summoned over here for sure to leave this zone open. So we'll assume that it's there, and we'll assume that I didn't do something stupid on video. That's what we'll just assume. So in this scenario, we can reincarnate the Sunlight Wolf for another wolf. That will trigger the Roar in our graveyard to set itself. So Roar sets itself. We can then use the effect of Sunlight Wolf to add Circle back to our hand. From here, we can use the Jaguar to summon itself by shuffling back a Sunlight Wolf. And then from here, we're going to go ahead and do something kind of odd because I mentioned this a second ago. We're going to make the Splash Mage, which seems weird because we can't use the effect, but you'll see why. So we link the Stalio and the Jaguar. And then we're going to link the Foxy and the Splash Mage for Heat Soul. Heat Soul can pay 1,000 to draw a card. We draw Will, which isn't anything crazy this turn. But basically we'd set Circle and we'd go into the end phase, and during our opponent's turn, Heat Soul could draw us another card, which it draws us an Imperm, which doesn't help us right now. If this was like, so I'm playing, I think 12 hand traps. I think I'm playing 3 Imperm, 3 Valor, 3 Crow, and 3 Ash. So if I had drawn any of the other hand traps that I was playing, it would have been fantastic. But still, it gets us more cards in our hand and more things to interact with our opponent on our turn, possibly. So we also have a graveyard presence built up, which is going to be very important in this matchup, or any matchup, because you want to be able to just cycle through stuff. So essentially what we're going to have is we're going to have a negation and either a search or a way to make our Sunlight Wolf unaffected, and we got to draw extra cards. So yeah, that's number 2. We'll go ahead and do another one. So yeah, basically you can extend your resources out. The only thing that sucked about that was the fact that we were locked into fire monsters. Like, honestly, having Stalio back has some benefits, but there are also a lot of disadvantages because there are so many times where it's like, oh man, like I would really prefer not to be locked into fire monsters right now. Like, it'd be so much better if I didn't have to do that. So for me, like, I think that Stalio is fantastic because it helps you dig, but it also gives you some issues too. So that's like the downside, is that there are certain things that it limits you from doing. I just have to check something because it looks like these are okay. I thought I felt a sleeve split, but it definitely didn't because I would have seen it. But yeah, that's the one thing that's like a big downside. But let's go ahead and draw some cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this is a little odd. This is going to be like a very basic end board, like really basic. So basically you can actually do one of 2 things. I apologize. You do have 2 lines of play, and both of them are very easy. your first line of play is normal Falco. The foul triggers to special itself, and then you can make a Baguska. That's option number 1. Option number 2, you normal the Falco, you link for Balinks. Obviously the Balinks won't search because we have the Sanctuary in hand, but to the summon you get to trigger the Falco, and then you can link, and you can do one of two things here. This is where it gets interesting. You can either make a Sunlight Wolf, or you can make a Splash Mage. So the Sunlight Wolf automatically grants you access to your Roar being active, which is good. But if you do the Splash Mage, now you're going to be able to do your Heat Soul plays. So it's kind of a matter of what you want to do, where you want to go. Let's go ahead and assume that we do the Splash Mage version, because the version making the Sunlight Wolf doesn't draw me any extra cards or make me search in weird ways. So we're going to go ahead and do the Splash Mage combo so you can see what we draw at least. So the Splash Mage brings back the Falco. Actually, I'm sorry. The Splash Mage brings back the Foul, and the Falco bounces the Foul. I completely slipped up there. So now this comes back to our hand, which is crazy. We can then go ahead and link these for our copy of Heat Soul. And then we'll pay 1,000 to draw a card. There's a Circle. We can activate Circle, which in this scenario doesn't really do much for us. Yeah, because we've already normal summoned. If we discard Spinny, it does nothing because we can't bring it back, so we don't have a Salamangreat monster on the board. We can't put Foxy in the grave because there's no way of doing so right now. So basically what we do is we would just have to grab Gazelle, and from there pretty much do next to nothing for the turn, which is why it's almost better, and this is why I was saying this, it's almost better to go with the Sunlight Wolf play off of that, because if you go with the Sunlight Wolf play, you at least have your negation with Roar and your banish with Crow. So that's a really important thing to note. This does get you more draws, and on your opponent's turn you will get another draw, which will be for a Buffalo, but that's not a hand trap, so it doesn't even matter. But yeah, like there are multiple routes. Even with that hand was subpar, and there was still 3 different routes that we could take with that hand, which to me is like absolutely insane. We have 3 routes that you can go on with a hand that's even subpar, never mind a hand that's like really good. So that's like the tough part about this deck and teaching this deck, is that it's completely situational based on the deck that you're playing against. It's also completely situational based on whether you're going first or second and the line that you want to go for. There's so much that goes into playing this deck, and everyone's like, oh, Salamangreat's easy, it doesn't evolve or anything. Trust me, it evolves. It just evolves in a weird way. But looking at the cards here, this is pretty darn good. We can go ahead and start. I'm not going to do the mining search yet because I want to draw 2 cards. That seems really good to me. So we normal the Buffalo, we link it. The Buffalo will be Chainlink 1, the Balinks Chainlink 2. So we get to search for Sanctuary, and then we'll get to pitch the Spinny and draw 2 cards, which can also get us into more cards to put into our graveyard off of our Signet mining. So we pitch the Spinny and we draw 2. There's another Spinny and a Called By, which is cool. Because at this point, like, this would be the point where they would droll, and we drew the Called By, so you can just Called By the droll, which is nuts. And then let's assume that they don't, though. We go ahead and we mining away the other Spinny, and we grab a copy of Gazelle. There's our Gazelle. Keep in mind, this is pure salad. This is without like any adventure engine or any of the code talker stuff. Like, this is just straight up Salamangreat. With nothing crazy behind it. Mining goes to grave. From here, we're going to go ahead and activate the Sanctuary, and I'm going to reincarnate the Balinks for another Balinks. That'll trigger Gazelle. Gazelle effect to dump now. So considering it's dumping, we're going to send one of our traps, which in this case, we have a Veiler in hand. So I'm going to send Roar. Perfect. All right, so now the Spinny will go ahead and summon itself onto the board. And we're going to overlay into Stalio. Stalio effect, detaching the Gazelle, summoning the Jaguar. And now we're going to go ahead and link these two for a Sunlight Wolf. Now from here we have multiple options. This is where it gets fancy. We'll call it fancy. So what we're gonna do is, seeing we've already reincarnated with Sanctuary, I'm gonna use the Stalio and the Sunlight Wolf to make another Sunlight Wolf. So now what happens is that Sunlight Wolf can basically add back the roar. So the roar comes back to hand, or the other option is you set the roar off of its own effect. So the reason that it's important to point that out is because we have Will in hand. So because we have Will in hand, that actually makes it where using the roar's effect to set itself is better than the Sunlight Wolf. So let's assume that the roar sets itself, because now what happens is we can activate Will. Now, one of the things that we want to do actually prior to this, so we want to Jaguar, shuffle back the additional Sunlight Wolf or the Mirage Stalio. Basically the Wolf is the better way to go here. Like, you don't need Stalio that much later in the game. So we shuffle that back, and then the Sunlight Wolf is going to grab us our Gazelle back to hand. And currently we have 2 Spinnies, a Stalio, 2 Balinks, and a Buffalo in our graveyard. And from here, we have to consider what our next line of play is going to be, which would be activating the Will and sending it to summon out Stalio and Spinny. So with these cards now being on the field, we're going to do that weird play that we did before, where we link the Stalio and the Jaguar. We make a Splash Mage, which won't be able to use effect because we use Stalio. Then you link the Spinny and that for a Heat Soul. And then Heat Soul will pay 1,000 to draw a card. We draw a Circle, which is pretty good. We can use the Circle, or we can save it. So here's the thing. We can add back a Will off of our Sunlight Wolf, or we can activate Circle. And then after that, we can add back the Circle right away off of the Sunlight Wolf. So those are your 2 options that you have. It's dependent on where you're going, like with your combo. Like I said, that's kind of what you have to look at. You have a lot of resources in your graveyard right now. So, and also if you're fearing Nibiru, you probably would want to keep this. Because, like, your opponent can only Nibiru you during main phase. So if you say attempting to end like main phase and move towards end phase, and they're like Nibiru, you can be like, okay, well, I can at least circle my Sunlight Wolf and keep it. So it's almost better to add the Will back to hand, because you have graveyard resources in that of Spinny and Jaguar, and you have Gazelle in hand. So your next turn, you don't have to worry about your follow-up. So the search isn't as important right now because of that. We're also going to get another draw off of Heat Soul if there like isn't a nib involved. So this gives you extra extension, which is even better. So I would add the Will back, and I would set the Called By. So the Called By gets set, and then I would attempt to end my main phase and move into the end phase. And if they say it's okay, you can circle during end phase to search. And if they try and nib you or something, you can just circle to avoid the destruction of the Sunlight Wolf before you go to end phase. So yeah, that's actually really, really crazy that you can do stuff like that. So, and then obviously on our opponent's turn, we can Heat Soul the draw card, which is a Crow. Wow, that's actually insane. So now we have Valor, Crow, Roar, and Called By. Yeah, like that's probably the best hand that we've had so far. That's actually like really nutty. You're probably winning the game with that against most matchups. It's just really good, and it puts in a lot of work. So let's go ahead and shuffle it up, and I think I'm going to do just one more. I think after I do one more, everyone will kind of get the point, and they'll understand how I play this deck, how I pilot it, and what some of the combos are. But yeah, let's go ahead and shuffle this up for one more. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. We haven't had an absolutely terrible hand, which is good. So that's kind of a plus. All right, let's go ahead. Last test hand of the video. Let me just straighten the mat out here a little bit. Got a little slipping and sliding action going on there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Also a really good hand, going first or second. Doesn't matter what we do with this hand. If it's first or second, we do have plays, which is fantastic. So like I said, we're kind of assuming that we don't get hand trapped for the most part in these combo videos or test hand videos, just because it's easier for me to show you what you can do to the fullest extent, and you can kind of like narrow it down from there if you get hand trapped. But we circle here, obviously grabbing our copy of Gazelle. All right, can normal summon the Jaguar and link it, making a Balinx, Chainlink 1, Gazelle Chainlink 2. This hits the board, and then we search for Sanctuary, and then our Gazelle effect will trigger to dump a card. This is where it gets interesting. You can send you could send a trap, you could send a monster, whatever you feel comfortable with. In this case, I'm gonna send Roar because it's a counter trap, and it gives us another way to interrupt our opponent, which obviously is really important. So now we go ahead and we link these two, and we make Sunlight Wolf. We can then use the Sanctuary, and then we'll reincarnate for another Sunlight Wolf. When that happens, the Roar's effect will trigger itself again to set itself. And then we'll use the Sunlight Wolf to add back the circle. Then we can do the Jaguar, shuffling back the Sunlight Wolf. And then this Sunlight Wolf will trigger to add the Gazelle back to hand. This is where it gets interesting. Now, in this scenario, I wouldn't go Heat Soul. The only reason being is that you have the Roar set, and if you make Heat Soul, you kind of just shut yourself off from what you were trying to do the entire time. So what you would be better off doing, if you wanted to do anything weird or funky, is you would make these into transcode, and then you would revive this off of the transcode, because I play 2 transcode. This card is absolutely bonkers, and like being able to use it multiple times is crazy. Because there'll be times that you want to use it to OTK, and there are times that you can use it to like revive a Heat Soul, which is actually insane. So in this scenario, you could literally link these, and you can make a transcode, and then you could transcode effect to bring back the Sunlight Wolf. And now this is at 23, this is at 28, and your opponent's not going to be able to target them, which is pretty good. And then you can set the Imperm and the Circle. And then during your opponent's turn, you have 2 crows to interact with. You have a Roar, you have an Imperm, and you're going to have a Search, because this is no longer reincarnated. So like you didn't use the reincarnation summon, so basically it's going to be a search, and you have the Gazelle in hand, and on top of that you also have a copy of Jaguar in your graveyard for next turn. So yeah, that's basically the gist of some of the crazy cool stuff you can do with this deck. I hope that kind of went pretty far in depth as to like some of the things you can do, and it helped you figure out certain lines of play that maybe you hadn't considered before. I love playing this deck. This is one of my favorite decks to play. It just, you know, is one of those decks that I can always go back to. It's the deck that I've done best with at a regional. I think I got 4th place back in Eternal format. Yeah, it was back in Eternal format, and that was like a 240 person regional. it was an absolute blast. Like, I just love playing this deck because it has so much extension, and if your opponent cuts you off at the wrong time, they basically just, you know, screw themselves over. It also doesn't die to hand traps that badly. Not a lot of people are playing Nib right now, so that's kind of a plus. But yeah, that's basically the entirety of the Salamangreat test hand video. I hope it was helpful. I hope everybody learned something, and I hope that you guys are excited for more cool and awesome content in the future. But for right now, this is Drew, Traveler of the Burning Abyss, signing out.